Hello all, I'm MH and this is the If You Would Listen channel. On this episode of the Wild Soul series, I'll be covering the topics of duality, hierarchies and gender, particularly on the basis of nature versus nurture. Whilst doing my research, I came across an article that completely shifted my perspective on things, and I found it to be expressing views that are not very common and could be beneficial to the understanding of this particular topic. So I'll begin by exploring some technicalities, but the majority of this video will explore that article and various others I looked into after finding this. I will then do a second video to come later, which will explore more psychophilosophical aspects, ideas of androgyny and beliefs of various philosophers and psychologists such as Jung, as well as the exploration of the animal kingdom and the connection between human beings in these aspects. As you may have noticed, I'm attempting to do this video podcast style and see how that goes. And I'm also very excited for next week on Friday the 13th. I will be doing a special video for that, so do tune into that one. And I will also be when it comes to sex and gender, it is important to distinguish between the two. There is a difference between biological sex and gender roles and gender stereotypes, as well as gender identity in itself. Coming to duality, this first article that I will discuss, that I looked at, really explored this idea that we have come to as a world, and this need for everything to be placed in this concept of dualism, and that includes gender and the associations with them, and misogyny and patriarchy. And the author suggests that this comes naturally from a fear of death, which is the perspective that I found quite interesting and I will explore in various aspects, as well as the prejudices caused. So the abstract of the first article, which is Bodies and Souls, Sex, Sin and the Senses of Patriarchy, a Study in Applied Dualism by Sheila Ruth, from the journal Hypatia, Volume 2, Philosophy and Women Symposium of 1987, reads, what elements lie at the core of patriarchal consciousness and give it its particular expressions? Beneath the hatred of women, at its source, is a profound, dissociating fear. The fear of non-being, the absence beyond death. In an effort to escape death and non-being, the patriarchs have constructed a conception of existence which is split in two, with eternal life, God, meaning, and spirit on one side, and bodily death on the other. The masculist association of women with bodies, nature, and the birthing-dying cycle places us clearly on the side of death, in the realm of being which is, and necessarily must be, despised and controlled. Alienation from the rhythms of life, giving rise to a crisis of meaning, the denial of death, which leads paradoxically to an adoration of death, and a hysterical ambivalence to sex and sensuality, find concrete expression in the personal and institutionalized hatred of women. Regarding the definition of sex, not only does the author show its limited and narrow perspective and framework, but also the long-held association of this nature with womanity and womankind. When looking up the heading sex in Thesaurus 1946, the associations are kind, womankind, class division, subfamily, make, caste, form, mold, female. These are just some examples. The article states that shows this division between good and bad and how all these bodily functions and naturally womankind fall into this negative side. Like the words we use to describe, say, intercourse, cursing and foul language, dirty, sex and sexuality in our culture. One lowers oneself to the dirt. The article also goes on to construct a table of these various disopposed imperfections reside together with darkness, evil, and the evil even darker than evil, femaleness. So some of these are limited, unlimited, odd, even, one, many, right, left, male, female, which in itself I don't think are actually opposites and many. Of course, there's many reasonable explanations for this. Difference doesn't equate opposition. Rest, motion, straight, crooked, light, darkness, good, evil, square, oblong, one, many, God, the devil, perfection and imperfection. Could these all be constructs, even if these did exist? Are they really opposite in the true sense of opposite? Eternal, transitory, spirit, body, heaven, earth or hell, life, death, salvation, damnation, mind, passion, rationality, emotion, ethereal, carnal, right, wrong, virtue, sin, good, bad, light, dark. Continuing on, eternal life, Godhood, goodness, and salvation stand in strict opposition to physical existence, sense, sensuality, death, and ultimately woman, who for men incorporate them all. Now woman in patriarchy is body, primarily, essentially. It should be noted that the dichotomy drawn in the table of opposites presents not only the interpretations of cosmic reality, but a picture of social reality as well. The categorization of concepts in the table mirrors the enumeration of traits assigned to men and women in the Western gender dichotomy, the entire superstructure of masculinity and femininity. One can clearly see embedded in the side of pristine perfection and stereotype of men, rational, duty-bound, principled, and emotionally under control. By the same token, women are said to reflect the sides of chaos, emotional, irrational, unpredictable, and obsessed with their bodies and appearance. Of course, we see these ideas all throughout the media and everywhere. Now coming to the reasons suggested for this, which I found quite fascinating. To quote, women's lives in primitive rich, in the past or in the present, have certain powerfully defining commonalities. Almost universally, we are not only the producers of living beings, we are the maintainers of life in one-on-one, basic and immediate relationships. Not only do we provide with our bodies the blood and bone of other bodies, but we feed them,
not in just a distant way, as by bringing into proximity with the other or a piece of meat or a bit of grain, but in the most intimate way. We open the mouth of the other and place in it food we have mashed or softened, liquid we have carried, or even our own breast. We clean that mouth of its droolings and fill it again until the other is satisfied. We clean that other being, not merely its surroundings or its belongings. We touch with our hands or our mouth its body until it is free of dirt and discomfort. We hold those others close to us when they need. We feel their heartbeats and smell their sweat, taste their tears. They are really far from us, if not physically, emotionally. Women's bodies and experiences are grounded in the business of immediate physical existence. Those of us even who do not ourselves give birth and nurture still belong to the class of beings who do, and are therefore heirs to that consciousness. We cannot escape from that reality, and in any sane universe, very likely we would not want to. Somewhere else there's also mention of the paradox that the vivid realization of life is naturally a realization of death, which is the fear. And something along the lines of women literally open their legs and give out living beings. So this is the connotation of life and death that can be terribly frightening. Men's lives are very different, historically and in the present, based both in biology as well as choice. Males have been removed or distanced from the very immediate processes of life maintenance. Of course, this is understandable, as biologically they haven't had to take on that task and be so intimate with it. Not that it's natural to then have those responsibilities after. As I often talk about in my later, the possibility versus duty, having a vessel versus being a vessel, and such ideas. To any woman who has carried a child, given birth and nursed, it is obvious that such experiences have profound effects on one's sense of reality and one's place in it, upon one's values, beliefs, and behaviors, and ultimately upon one's conceptions of the cosmos, life, and death. They make one different. In refusing participation in the concrete trivialities of interpersonal care, men have separated themselves from the very meaning of life and its sense of belonging. Isolated from human-animal meaning, literally from human nature, men become alienated from the chain of existence, from the sense of that is yielded by their attention to generation, in both senses of the word, from the past to the present to the future. Lose a sense of the meaning of life, which is life. They must find or create or invent it somewhere else, alien to the concrete, the real. They are deemed to seek refuge in abstraction, sometimes completely unconnected to lived reality. They come to fear death, obsessively, hysterically, as those who can find no reasonable resolution, no accommodation, as women do in their participation in their cycle. The aversion to death condemns to an aversion to life. That is the source of masculine preoccupation with death and the static, that is, male necrophilia. The rejection of the body, earthly life, psychic death, to the denigration of sex, hence life, hence woman, hence earth, to abstracted reality, to dualism, and back to the separation from life, it spirals in increasing intensity and madness. In this consciousness, all becomes caught together in an intricate web of relation: death, bodies, women, sex, contempt, violence, control, power, God. These are the opposite sides. So that makes sense. There's a heavenly life somewhere else that is created, and there's no grasp of the life here. These are some interesting ideas, and the dualism has seeped into womanhood itself and these ideas of femininity in very detrimental ways, I think. There's always a dichotomy, two sides of it. Even with the hypersexuality of women portrayed in media, they still are running away from it in essence. And there's two sides. One can never find the real place. It's either even in the good sense, quote unquote, there's the idealization of the fairer sex, the gentler sex, the weaker sex, usually actually only to do with white women, which doesn't show anything that is of natural essence. And it's just prejudice in how we view things, bias, fetishes. All aspects of being a woman as a human being is never considered either evil or good, soft or tough. Can't be like both evil and good, soft and tough, and just a human being. Everything is separated. There's even the romanticization of sex segregation brings a lot of pressure, having to always be the fairer sex or whatever case this may be, and not just who you are as a human being. And there's always two sides. It's either like what they call that virgin whore dichotomy, which I'll look into in some articles, but basically you can't own the physical aspects of your sexuality. And I say physical aspects because there is so much more to sexuality that doesn't have to just do with heterosexual intercourse. So you can't own that, or that is literally your entire identity is the physical aspects of your sexuality as a woman, which is really ridiculous. So even but all of this all comes down to the hatred of it. So it's either it's terrible, so when you express it, it's like sin, alluring, seducing, evil, all that. That is not good, but tempts you like Eve and all these myths and all that. Or it's just completely rejected and you're innocent because you do not associate yourself with these evil aspects. A Madonna whore complex is the inability to maintain sexual arousal within a committed, loving relationship. This psychological complex is said to develop in men who see women as either saintly Madonnas or debased prostitutes. Men with this complex desire a sexual partner who has been degraded, the whore, while they cannot desire the respective partner, the Madonna. Freud wrote, where such men love, they have no desire, and where they desire, they cannot love. There was another thought I had, what was it? Oh yes, let me read this first. So this is from an article called Real Men Don't Eat Strong Women, The Virgin Madonna Whore Complex by Tanza Deborah. Hence, that women who exhibit the combined qualities of openness, vulnerability, and playfulness of the Virgin, the niceness, tenderness, and empathy of the Madonna or Mother, the sexuality of the whore, and formerly male types of intelligence, courage, directness, and honesty are often rejected, sought ambivalently, or sought only for some facets by men. It is argued that fears, wishes, and assumptions about our own and others' fullness, completeness, and personal entitlement are at the core of this paradox, and that limitation and control of the central defense is created. In attempts to deal with these fears, wishes, and assumptions, both women's and men's defensive fights from wholeness, integration, maturity, and finite mortality are described, including very childlike behaviors or counterphobic exaggerations of single parts of function into culturally idealized images. Virgin Madonna, whore, and smart man, omnipotent father, tutor of virgins. So yeah, I was just thinking of this idea that if you're complete, you cannot be loved, or then you have like no need for there to be another person, which doesn't necessarily need to be true. But if you think about it, really can connect to that fear of death that was being discussed again, because it's that fear of, oh, I won't be needed, so you just have to be this one aspect so that you can need my aspects and I can survive, because there's this idea that I'll be useless and therefore become non-existent if you embody all these qualities, which really doesn't have to be the case if we looked at things differently. And finally, in prejudices and dichotomies, I looked at this article about the historical roots of the sexualization of black women and girls from blackburncenter.org. This is basically black women versus white women, seen as more mature and less innocent than their white peers, which may allow predators to exploit them. Research has shown that black girls are viewed through a hypersexual lens, and as a result are less likely to be believed when they report sexual assault. Before the slave trade took hold in America, European travelers to Africa were both fascinated and appalled by the dress and practices of the Africans they encountered there. The minimal amounts of clothing worn by Africans appropriate in hot climate. Again, why does the fact that some tribes practice polygamy and the seemingly suggestive tribal dances led these Europeans to believe that Africans were sexually lewd. William Smith wrote that African women were hot constitution ladies who are continually contriving stratagems of how to gain a lover. The initial stereotype of black women as sexually promiscuous arose from these writings. In the United States, the idea that black women had insatiable appetites for sex was used to justify the rape of enslaved women by their owners. For owners, this practice had added effect of producing additional enslaved people. Under the laws of the time, any child born to an enslaved person would also be enslaved. So, enslaved women and girls were frequently pregnant. This was encouraged as a way to increase the number of enslaved people on a plantation and often rewarded. But guess what? When an enslaved woman or girl became pregnant, it was often used as proof that she had an insatiable sexual appetite. At the same time, enslaved people were regularly put on auction blocks in naked or nearly naked states. This display stood in stark contrast to white women, who were clothed nearly head to toe. It reinforced the idea that white women were modest and pure, fair, while black women were immodest and sexually lewd. Even if things were natural, doesn't mean they have to stay that way. Fate, my favorite line actually, from the recent Terminator, Dark Fate, is fuck fate. Like, an example, belief something's existence, belief in something's existence and belief in something, a system, doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. I can believe there is a force or being of creation, a creator, and not believe in that because I think it's done a pretty useless job. I can be biologically destined to reproduce, but have no intention whatsoever of having children ever. And there's even cases where it's like before in less developed countries, having children was actually a threat rather than a means of survival because of child mortality and the likes. So yeah, these are just some ideas. Nature versus nature, whether or not it exists, is the first part, but really, does it have that much impact? And I feel like I've talked a lot today and explored so many ideas, so I will leave that to settle in. What are your thoughts? Please do share your ideas and thoughts in the comments. I'm always open to discuss. And if you enjoyed this video, do like it. Again, tune in on Friday the 13th and subscribe. Other than that, thank you for watching. I will leave us to try and collect and gather our thoughts. Bye. I have placed links and references to all the articles and persons referenced in this video.